Have you ever added something to your home just because it looked elegant, classic, or had good vibes, but then the whole space felt weirdly heavy? Like money stopped flowing the way it used to. You started losing sleep. You felt drained in your own living room. And no matter how many candles you lit, the energy just wouldn't lift. That might not be just stress. It could be a Feng Shui trap. The kind that quietly invites in the wrong kind of energy. Or worse, something that doesn't even belong in this world. See, not every beautiful object belongs in a home. Some items look peaceful on the outside, but carry stories, memories, and vibrations from people long gone. And when they're placed in the wrong corners, they don't just block wealth or luck. They open doors you never meant to open. Today we're diving into 7 Feng Shui decorations that may look harmless, but can quietly attract lingering spirits, disturb your peace, and drain your money flow without making a sound. And trust me, they don't creak, but they hold conversations you never hear. If this kind of wisdom speaks to you, if you've ever felt like your space looks perfect, but still feels off or unsettled, thank you for being here. Feel free to hit like, subscribe, or even drop a comment below. It helps YouTube know you're part of this quiet shift. Some objects catch the wind. Others catch something else entirely. David never really believed in ghosts. Not in the Hollywood sense, anyway. But there were nights when the house didn't feel right. No loud noises, no footsteps. Just something too quiet. A silence that didn't feel empty. It felt watched. He'd hung a beautiful bronze wind chime on the porch 2 years ago. It was a gift from his sister meant to calm the air and bring in good feng shui. But after a while, the sound changed. It didn't ring like before. It whispered, even on windless days. And for some reason, he'd stopped sitting outside. In feng shui, wind chimes are like messengers. They're meant to shift the qi, attract lucky flow, and break up heavy, stagnant energy. But when placed wrong, especially near the main door, or in directions like northwest or southwest, they don't clean the energy. They call to it. There's a difference between inviting in good energy and sending out signals into the unknown. Chimes catch sound waves, but they also echo emotional frequencies. Grief, loss, loneliness. David had hung his wind chime right at the entrance, facing the wide front lawn and an old pine tree. It wasn't moving air. It was catching something else. David's a rational man. Keeps receipts, checks his locks. He doesn't buy into the spooky side of things. But over time, something shifted in him. He stopped using the front door at night. Started turning on every single light in the house even when just walking to the kitchen. He couldn't explain why. He just felt better that way. His sleep got weird. Money started feeling blocked, like things cost more than they should. And he couldn't shake this subtle pressure in his chest whenever the wind chime moved, but there was no breeze. It's hard to say, I'm scared, when you don't even know what you're scared of. It's kind of like leaving your front gate open, because someone said it's welcoming. But if you're not careful, you're not just inviting friends. You're sending out an open invitation to strangers who don't knock. Wind chimes in the wrong place act like spiritual megaphones. They don't just signal the wind. They echo across layers you don't see. And if the frequency is wrong, It's like yelling down a dark hallway and hoping only light answers back. David ended up Googling wind chime bad luck Feng Shui after a YouTube video randomly showed up on his feed. That led him to a Feng Shui blog that talked about directional placement. Turns out, placing wind chimes at the wrong compass angle, especially near bedroom windows or front doors, can mess with both energy and sleep. They act as energy amplifiers. And when they're off, they amplify the wrong stuff. Some experts even say they stir up spiritual static, especially if the chime sounds off-key or hollow. He took his down the next day. The porch felt quiet after that. Still, but not heavy. David left a small bowl of salt water by the door for 3 days. Just something he read about clearing energy. He didn't think it'd do much, but the sleep came back. He started using the front door again, and that tight feeling in his chest? Gone. He still keeps the wind chime, just not hanging. It rests in a wooden drawer in the garage, next to a bundle of sage and an old photo of his dad. Not thrown out, just resting. He joked with his sister about it later. Next time you want to give me something spiritual, maybe send cookies instead. And honestly, she agreed. Sometimes Feng Shui isn't about fear. It's just about listening. Even when the house is quiet, not every sound is just sound. Some carry echoes of places you didn't mean to call. Not everything you reflect belongs to you. Some mirrors don't show the room. They show what's still lingering in it. After taking down the wind chime, David finally started sleeping through the night again. But not deeply. It felt like his dreams stayed half awake. Like he was still in the hallway of his mind, never quite getting through the door. Every morning, he'd wake up groggy, even after 8 hours. Something in the house still felt slightly wrong. But he couldn't place it, and his energy kept slipping. His teenage daughter, Erica, had just moved back home after her breakup. She took the guest room, across from his bedroom. She was the one who first said it. "Dad, why does the mirror outside your room feel like it's watching me walk?" David hadn't really thought about it. It was an antiqueval, heavy frame hung perfectly across from the end of the hallway, right between the bedrooms. He'd picked it up years ago at a flea market in Portland. Liked the frame. Didn't even notice the angle. Feng Shui teaches us this simple rule. Mirrors are portals of energy. They bounce, double, reflect, but they don't filter. When placed opposite bedroom doors, staircases, or hallways, they do more than reflect light. They keep energy moving when it's supposed to rest. And worse, they can pull in energy from spaces that should remain closed. That's why Feng Shui warns about mirrors near bedrooms. They bounce your spirit when it's trying to settle, like trying to fall asleep with someone silently pacing the hall. But it's not a someone. When David's mirror faced both bedrooms, it didn't just reflect bodies walking past. It bounced traces of energy from two people trying to rest and rebuild. And instead of rest, it became a quiet tug of war, one that neither of them could win. David was already carrying the weight of midlife bills, mortgage stress, and trying to be the stable parent after Erica's heartbreak. He didn't want to deal with spooky nonsense, but then she started having headaches, tension behind the eyes, waking up more tired than she went to bed, and she started sleeping with her door closed and locked. Not because of fear, but because something in the hallway gave her the creeps. And then he started dreaming of walking that hallway too. Endlessly. Never reaching his bedroom. Waking up facing the door. Always cold. Money started feeling tight again. Weird, unexpected bills. Small tech around the house breaking for no reason. A client ghosted him after promising a deal. The cash flow wasn't just blocked. It felt like something was draining it drop by drop. Having a mirror facing the hallway at night is like leaving a bright screen on while you sleep. But for your energy, your subconscious keeps checking it, keeps glancing, keeps wondering if that shape it saw was just a reflection or something else walking past. In Feng Shui, the mirror becomes a loop. And if placed wrong, it traps energy in circles, like looping a video of your worst moment and leaving it running in the background. David's hallway wasn't just reflecting space. It was replaying unrest. Every single night. He ended up finding a podcast about Feng Shui design for sleep. While cleaning the garage one Saturday, the guest speaker was an interior therapist who said mirrors near sleeping areas confuse the body's natural energetic boundary. It's like your nervous system sees the movement, even if your eyes are closed. And when placed at eye level in narrow passages, mirrors can trigger low-grade anxiety, light startle responses, and even influence sleep cycles. She added one thing that stuck with him. Some mirrors aren't just decorative, they're active. That hit different. David didn't throw it away, but he moved the mirror into the garage leaning, not hanging. He wiped it with salt water, lit a simple white tea light near it for 3 nights. Didn't say any words, just stood quietly nearby. Let the space recalibrate. Erica noticed first. No more hallway weirdness, she said. She left her door open the next night. David stopped waking up cold. The tightness in the air relaxed. And the mirror still leans there today, covered with a light cloth. Not feared, just respected. He texted his old college buddy that week, the one who always said Feng Shui was just furniture magic, and added, "Bro, I swear a mirror almost made me broke." His buddy sent back, "Then I guess I should stop shaving in mine." They both laughed. Because when it comes to energy, sometimes it's not about ghosts. It's just about where you let your reflection live. Not every mirror is about what it shows. Some are about what they remember. If this story is quietly hitting something in you, if your own space ever feels a little off, and you don't know why, go ahead and hit like or subscribe. Your energy matters here. Energy doesn't just move through space. It moves through time. And when time gets stuck, so does everything else. David hadn't touched the living room clock in years. It stopped ticking one random Tuesday in March. He meant to replace the battery. Never did. It hung right above the bookshelf between 2 faded family photos and a dusty wooden bowl no one used. He got used to it. Everyone did. When guests came over, they'd look up, see it stuck at 3:33, and smile like it was an artistic choice. But lately, David started noticing something odd. Every time he walked past that room, it felt slow, not quiet, slowed down, like the house held its breath around that space. And whenever bills came due or something went missing, It always seemed to happen after sitting in there. In Feng Shui, clocks represent movement and flow. They symbolize the rhythm of life, including your money, energy, and luck. When a clock stops working, it becomes a symbol of frozen qi. And if left broken, it doesn't just not work. It holds back progress, decisions, fresh cash flow, even the desire to move forward. Especially when that clock sits in the wealth sector of your living space or near where you pay bills or keep receipts. David's stopped clock sat directly across from the coffee table, where he opened mail. It was where he sat to make decisions, to process numbers, to think through next steps. And over time, he stopped doing that. He'd pay bills late, procrastinate on paperwork, let things float, not because he meant to, but because the room just felt like waiting. David started calling it the static zone. The room felt heavy, like it had too much memory. Even the dog stopped lying there. Friends who visited would wander in and wander right back out. No one stayed long. Erica joked once that it felt like the room where nothing happens. And maybe she was right. That month, David missed 2 work calls. Forgot to send back a signed contract. Got a parking ticket because the mail sat unopened. His money flow didn't crash, but it leaked quietly, like a faucet dripping in the attic. And he kept thinking about that clock, frozen at 3:33. Every time he noticed it, he'd get this weird flicker of memory, like a replay of something that didn't fully happen. He couldn't tell if it was déjà vu or just brain fog. But either way, time didn't feel linear anymore. Leaving a broken clock on your wall is like keeping a broken compass in your pocket and still trying to find your way. It won't scream that you're lost. It'll just make sure you never really arrive. In Feng Shui, everything speaks to the subconscious. A stopped clock whispers to you, "Stay still. Don't decide yet. This isn't the moment." And you obey it without knowing. David's finances weren't dying. They were floating. His drive was on pause. And every time he meant to get to it, he'd find himself scrolling instead, doing one more thing. Losing track. He ended up reading an article from a minimalism site about symbolic clutter, items that hold emotional or energetic weight without us realizing it. The writer mentioned how stopped time in objects can reflect emotional freeze, grief, fatigue, decision, burnout, especially clocks. Studies have even linked environmental cues like visual signs of stillness or decay to shifts in cognitive focus, productivity, and emotional momentum. One psychologist called it passive anchoring. The clock doesn't make you sad. It just holds the sadness in place. David took the clock down one Thursday morning. No big moment. Just finally did it. He popped the back open, tossed the corroded battery, and gave the whole thing a wipe down with vinegar and lemon. He didn't even replace it. He hung a small print of a sunrise where the clock used to be. Nothing expensive, just something that felt forward. The room felt brighter, still quiet, but not slow. That week, he finally filed his taxes, picked up a side gig he'd been avoiding, and checked his online bank account. Without that old, nagging, not yet feeling, time started moving again. So did the money. Erica noticed the sunrise print the next time she came over. Finally, let the haunted time go, huh? David laughed. I figured if I'm gonna feel broke, at least I shouldn't look stuck, too. She smirked, spoken like a man on the rise. Sometimes, a Feng Shui fix is just an overdue moment, finally showing up. Clocks don't just count minutes, they hold momentum. And when that stops, so do we. That part of the house didn't feel peaceful. It felt paused. The energy wasn't blocked. It was frozen, like nothing new could get in and nothing old could leave. Money doesn't always scream when it's stuck. Sometimes it just waits with you. I figured if I'm gonna feel broke, at least I shouldn't look stuck too. Some things aren't haunted. They're just never allowed to leave. There's a wall in David's hallway. 4 black and white portraits lined up shoulder to shoulder. His grandparents on the left, his parents in the middle, an old photo of him and his brother, 10 years old, on the right. He used to love that wall. It felt rooted. Until lately, every time he walked past it, he felt like he was being watched. Not by eyes, but by expectations. The energy there wasn't peaceful. It was dense. Like the hallway wasn't just a walkway, it was a museum, and he was the unpaid tour guide of a life he didn't live anymore. The air started feeling tight. He found himself holding his breath near it. Even guests, especially older ones, paused there. Some stared a little too long. Some didn't want to walk past at all. In Feng Shui, photos hold memory qi, the energy of time, connection, and emotional imprint. But when they're left faded, dusty, or unbalanced, they don't just share the past, they start trapping it. Portraits that dominate a hallway or narrow space can block movement. They freeze energy flow, especially if the faces in them are damaged, blurred, or never interacted with. They become symbols of unresolved emotion. And when placed near entryways or bedroom corridors, they invite the past to whisper louder than the present. David never realized that all 4 portraits were staring toward his bedroom. Every night, he walked through that gaze without knowing what it was doing to him. He didn't talk about his dad much. Didn't really have to. The photo said enough. There was a lot unsaid in that house. A lot held in. And the portrait wall carried it all. Grief that hadn't softened. Success that didn't quite land. Family roles that never quite healed. After a while, David started avoiding the hallway altogether. He'd use the back entrance, skip the lights, anything to not walk past that wall. That was when the migraines started. He blamed it on screens, stress, the weather. But deep down, he knew the house wasn't just tired. It was holding too much history in one spot. And every day he passed it, the weight stacked a little higher. A wall of faded portraits is like carrying your family album in your back pocket where you go, even when you don't need it. It doesn't scream. It presses. In Feng Shui, when old memory energy piles up without being refreshed, it starts to sour like leaving flowers in a vase too long. The water still looks clear, but something's turning. Those photos weren't haunting him. They were just never released. And that's worse sometimes. David caught part of a documentary on ancestral memory. While flipping through channels late one night, a therapist explained how visual reminders like photos can unconsciously anchor unresolved roles we grew up with. She said, "When we see unchanging images every day, we don't just remember. We relive, even if we don't want to." Turns out, environments with too many static memorials can lower cognitive renewal, cause sleep disturbance, and even affect confidence, especially when the faces never change, never move, and always look back. One Sunday, David took them all down. Not out of anger, not even sadness, just stillness. He dusted the frames, cleaned the glass, chose two to remain of his mom laughing, and one of his grandparents holding hands. He moved those two into the living room, by the window with morning light. The others he wrapped gently, placed in a linen box, and stored in the attic next to his brother's old guitar. He replaced the hallway space with a long, woven textile. Simple, hand-dyed, no faces, just movement. The hallway felt different that night. Not lighter, but clearer. And his sleep? Deep, undisturbed. For the first time in weeks. When Erica came by, she noticed the hallway right away. "Where'd the ancestors go?" she teased. David smirked. "Still around, just not breathing down my neck anymore." She grinned. "You're Feng Shuiing your past now?" "Something like that," he said. "Turns out the past doesn't pay the bills, but it sure knows how to block the cash flow." They laughed. Because sometimes healing doesn't mean erasing. It just means releasing the pressure. You can honor the past without living under its stare. The air near that wall felt loaded, like the space was trying to remember too much at once. Money wasn't stuck, it was distracted, sucked into memories that no longer served. Energy doesn't need permission to move, but sometimes it needs space to let go. Turns out the past doesn't pay the bills, but it sure knows how to block the cash flow. Some furniture holds memories, others hold presence, and some never stay quite empty. David inherited the chair from his great-aunt Ruth. A tall carved wood accent chair with spindled arms and a velvet cushion that had faded into an unplaceable shade of green. He placed it in the corner of the hallway, where it balanced the visual weight, according to a home decor article he'd read years ago. But no one sat in it. Not once. Not even the cat. And over time, he stopped passing close to that corner. He'd tilt his body ever so slightly as he walked by, as if trying not to disturb something. There were no creaks, no cold air, but the feeling hung there, as steady as breath, a quiet alertness, like the space itself was watching him move. In Feng Shui, every object either gives energy or absorbs it. Chairs are meant to receive people, hold space, support, rest, create gathering. But when a chair is never used, especially an heirloom, vintage, or antique, and sits alone in a shadowed or transitional area, it can become a magnet for stagnant qi. Worse, it can anchor unseen energy, emotions, events, or intentions that were never cleared. David's chair had belonged to a woman who'd lived alone. Until 94, it sat in her parlor for decades, visited only by silence and Sunday dust. And now, in his home, it didn't just hold history. It collected the pauses and the wealth energy around it, especially since it was placed near the back corner of the home. Started to feel hesitant, like something was waiting to be acknowledged. David couldn't explain why the air shifted every time he passed that part of the hallway. He wasn't scared. He just didn't feel alone when he was there. And he started avoiding that whole end of the house. Lights got left off. Books piled up on the shelves nearby. Even the walls felt cooler. One night, he fell asleep on the couch, only to dream he was sitting in that chair, unable to stand, unable to speak, just held in place, as if someone else had decided he needed to stay still. He woke up out of breath. The next morning, he forgot to log into work. Missed a payment draft. Lost a small freelance client who said he seemed off lately. His cash flow didn't crash, but the momentum of things, the little daily click of progress, it faltered, slipped through his hands like mist. Keeping an unused chair in a lived-in space is like keeping an open email that no one will ever reply to. It doesn't scream for attention. It just hovers. It becomes an invitation that's never closed. And in Feng Shui, that energy keeps doors half open, where neither endings nor beginnings happen cleanly. David's home had stopped feeling clear. It felt paused, like someone had walked in, but never left. And that chair? Always empty, but never quite vacant. While listening to an old episode of a grief and design podcast, David heard an expert mention energetic residue in heirloom furniture. She wasn't being spooky. She was being practical. Unused objects hold more than dust, she said. They hold emotional roles, especially chairs, especially when no one ever sits in them. Studies in design psychology have shown that environments with symbolic objects that aren't interacted with can subtly influence emotional regulation, dampen movement and tension, and create background tension. The body reads it, even if the brain dismisses it. David didn't want to throw the chair away. It was beautiful. It had meaning. But meaning doesn't always belong in the hallway. He gently moved it out one Saturday morning. Saturday with it for a moment on the porch. Spoke out loud, not to anyone, but more like a clearing. Thank you. But we're good now. Then he placed the chair in the sun for a few hours. Let the air shift it clean. He moved it into the guest room, placed a small cushion on it, and finally used it as a reading nook. He lit a candle that night. Slept better than he had all month. The hallway felt like just a hallway again. No watchers. No waiting. Just movement. Erica noticed the shift when she came by. Where's the haunted throne? David grinned. Got promoted to chair with a purpose. She raised an eyebrow. So it's got a job now. Pays better than some clients I've had, he chuckled. They both laughed. Because in the end, Feng Shui isn't just about what you keep. It's about what you finally start using. An empty chair isn't always just furniture. Sometimes it's holding the energy of what no one ever said. That space didn't feel still. It felt paused, like energy was holding its breath. Money didn't leave. It circled, waiting for the room to wake up. Some objects don't block wealth loudly. They just quietly slow everything down. Pays better than some clients I've had. There was a time David thought the wall-mounted sword was cool. A gift from an old client. Antique bronze, curved blade, displayed clean across his living room wall above the piano. Guests always commented on it. Looks powerful, they'd say. But lately, the power didn't feel good. It felt unsettling. The air in that room never fully relaxed. No matter how clean it was, no matter how fresh the candles, there was a tension, like the space was flexing even when no one was moving. It didn't creak. But it didn't breathe right either. He'd catch himself avoiding eye contact with the wall. The piano fell out of tune. He stopped sitting there altogether. The energy felt like someone had drawn a line in midair, and everything around it got stuck on either side. In Feng Shui, sharp objects represent cutting energy, forceful, fast, directional, while certain tools like small metal scissors or kitchen knives can be neutral if stored correctly. Decorative weapons, especially swords, spears, or arrows, carry yang heavy, attacking qi. If placed on display in common areas, especially facing doors or above places of relaxation, they don't protect the space, they divide it. They slice through the natural lucky flow and interrupt the way energy weaves through the room. Instead of creating protection, they create separation. Instead of channeling money or wealth, they create silent splits in emotional flow, cash flow, and even family communication. David had no idea his sword pointed toward the hallway, directly at the center of his home's Feng Shui energy field. The more he stayed in the house, the more he felt disconnected. Not just from people, from the room itself. That living room used to feel warm. Used to be where Erica curled up with her laptop, or where his friend Marcus came over to play chess on weekends. But people stopped using it. Calls got shorter. Invites slowed down. Conversations felt clipped. David started noticing he cut himself shaving more often. Nicked his finger on a box cutter. Even paper cuts more than usual. It was as if everything in his life had sharpened. Words, schedules, bills, even thoughts felt jagged. And weirdly, money came in, but always went right back out. No matter how much arrived, it disappeared like a clean slice gone before it landed. Displaying a sword in your home is like putting a knife on the dinner table and calling it a centerpiece. You may get used to it, but deep down, everyone's still sitting a little straighter. Everyone's a little on. Feng Shui doesn't just care about looks. It cares about vibration. And swords vibrate with action, separation, and defense. They don't invite calm. They hold standoff energy. And your home picks up on that tension, even when you don't. David didn't feel attacked, but he felt like he was always on alert, like something was about to happen. Scrolling Reddit one night, David landed on a Feng Shui thread, where someone posted, "Why does my home feel like it's always in a fight?" The top comment? "Check for weapons on display, even fake ones. Your nervous system doesn't always know the difference." That led David down a rabbit hole of design psychology. One article from a Scandinavian design site mentioned that symbolic aggression in decor can activate low-grade fight-or-flight signals in the brain, especially in places where rest, connection, or money planning happens. Turns out, the nervous system remembers shapes, especially ones made to threaten, even when they're decorative, even when you forgot they're there. David took the sword down late one evening. No music, no lights, just a quiet enough. He wrapped it in an old quilt, placed it in a storage box, and carried it out to the garage. Then he returned to the space and opened every window. Let the air breathe. He replaced it with a circular woven wall hanging. His daughter had gifted him years ago. Something round, something soft. The next morning, he sat at the piano, played a few notes. They held longer than before. Calls came in smoother that week. He laughed more during dinner. Bills still came, but they didn't cut. They moved, flowed. A few days later, Marcus dropped by for coffee. He glanced at the wall and asked, "Where's the Game of Thrones prop?" David raised his cup. "Retired. Now we're in the era of peace treaties." Marcus grinned. "Finally, that sword always made me feel like I was in trouble." They both laughed. Because sometimes, it's not about what your space looks like. It's about how it makes people breathe. Not every sharp edge draws blood. Some just quietly cut your peace and your money flow. The room didn't feel angry. It felt split, like the air had two different directions. Cash didn't drain. It scattered like the energy couldn't stay in one piece. Some wealth doesn't leave in a storm. It just slices off in silence. Now we're in the era of peace treaties. Some things don't need to move to change a room. They just need to stay still long enough to be forgotten. David had a pair of brass candle holders on the shelf near the entryway. Ornate, heavy, slightly tarnished. He'd found them years ago at an estate sale in Vermont. Liked the design. Never got around to buying candles for them. They became part of the furniture. Just there. Never used. Never cleaned. Just sat silently beneath the hallway light, always catching the corner of his eye, but never enough to really see. Until one morning when the sun came in low and hit them just right. That moment stuck with him, not because of how they looked, but because of the thought that dropped in his chest. Why does this feel like a memorial? In Feng Shui, candle holders represent activation energy, a tool meant to transform, to warm, to clear. But when left unused, dusty, or unlit, they become symbols of energy denied. They're tools designed to hold fire, but instead hold stillness. Placed near the entrance, they can slow money flow. Placed in the center of a home, they can mute emotional warmth. And placed near photos or heirlooms, they can anchor grieving energy, even if no one talks about the grief. David's candle holders sat beneath the portrait shelf, between faded books and a cracked ceramic vase. The whole corner read like a tribute to things that no longer spoke. And wealth energy, like light, needs something to respond to. Not emptiness pretending to be form. He started noticing he avoided that corner. It wasn't dramatic. Just a soft, daily drift around it. The same way you walk around a cold spot in the house without thinking. The days got heavier. He started sleeping in later. Forgot simple tasks. Microwaved the same coffee 3 times before drinking it. Cash felt weird again, like it came in, but the desire to do anything with it just faded. Like the candle holders. There, but never lit. Even the cat stopped going near that shelf. David felt like the air by that wall was holding its breath. Keeping candle holders you never light is like saving a dance for someone who never shows up. Over and over again. It's not the absence that gets you. It's the anticipation turned stale. In Feng Shui, objects that are designed to activate but are left inert become containers for suspended energy. They whisper, "Not yet." Still waiting. Nothing moves. And over time, your space starts to echo those messages until your habits and money and emotions all sync with the stillness. On a slow afternoon, David watched a short video from a Feng Shui coach based in Oregon. She spoke about the psychology of symbolic action objects. Tools like lighters, candles, bells that represent moment ignition. She explained that when these items go unused, they slowly shift from action cues to emotional fog. They become emotional placeholders, especially when linked to past events, loss, or someday energy. David realized he hadn't lit a real candle in over 3 years. The last time had been during a storm. When the power went out, funny how long it had stayed out afterward, in ways that had nothing to do with electricity. That evening, he brought home 2 small white tea candles, placed them gently into the brass holders, took a deep breath, lit both. The room shifted. Softly. Instantly. The air didn't change temperature, but it felt like someone had finally arrived. He let the candles burn all the way down. Didn't rush them. Didn't leave the room. The next day, he wiped the shelf, rehomed the cracked vase, put a small green plant in its place, something alive. And money? Didn't flood in, but it flowed. Enough to notice. Enough to feel momentum again. Erica popped by that weekend, glanced at the shelf and said, "Wow, flame upgrade?" David nodded. "Turns out I was holding on to empty fire." She laughed. "You sound like a candle poet." "Better than a broke one," he smiled. They stood there for a second, letting the space feel different, letting the light finally do its job. You don't have to light a candle every day, but you do have to stop pretending that never lighting it means the same thing. The space didn't feel haunted. It felt paused, like a whisper waiting too long. Energy didn't stop. It just had nowhere to go. Money doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it just forgets what warmth feels like. Better than a broke one? Some homes don't feel haunted, but they feel held. Held by things that once meant beauty, once meant tradition, but were never cleared, never thanked, never released. And slowly, room by room, the energy goes quiet. Not peaceful, just stuck. Not soft, just flat. And wealth, luck, flow? They don't run away screaming. They just stop showing up. But the moment you shift something, even the smallest thing, a wind chime moved, a mirror covered, a candle lit. The space remembers what it means to breathe again, to flow again. If something in today's story made you feel seen, if your own home has corners you've stopped noticing, and you're ready to see them with different eyes, I'm really glad you're here. Feel free to hit like, subscribe, or even drop a comment below. Sometimes that simple act is how energy starts moving again. Your space speaks. Wisdom listens.